Of all the prophets in the Old Testament, perhaps none was given a more difficult mission than Jeremiah. Jeremiah was told early on that he was chosen to serve even before he was born, but he would serve as God's voice to the kingdom of Judah in one of the most challenging times ever. Jeremiah was also told to not take a wife or have children, that his mission would consume all of his time, require all of his focus, and eventually take his entire life. Jeremiah was a contemporary with Lehi, and while we don't know if they ever met each other, they might have had some interesting discussions after they left the earth about why Jeremiah had to stand as a lonely voice against the wickedness in Judah. Meanwhile, Lehi was able to have a family, lead them to a promised land, and escape the destruction of Jerusalem. Adding to Jeremiah's burden, he knew that he was going to fail. The city that Jeremiah loved, Jerusalem, would be destroyed. The people Jeremiah loved would be destroyed or brought into bondage, and the Temple of Solomon, the center of their religious lives, would be completely leveled. Knowing all of these calamities would come, it's no surprise that Jeremiah's writings are filled with lamentations over the state of the kingdom of Judah. Given all these things, maybe we should expect Jeremiah's writings to be among the most depressing in the Old Testament. However, there is a bright thread of hope found in Jeremiah's writings as well, especially in Jeremiah 31. Jeremiah may have seen the downfall of Judah, but he also saw a time when all of Israel would be gathered again and brought back to their homeland. In the midst of his sorrows, the Lord showed Jeremiah a glimpse of a time when the covenant God had made with Israel would not only be repaired, but made completely new. Jeremiah prophesied, "Behold, the days come, saith the Lord, that I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and with the house of Judah, not according to the covenant that I made with their fathers in the day that I took them by the hand to bring them out of the land of Egypt, which my covenant they break, although I was a husband unto them, saith the Lord." This old covenant with Israel was written on tablets of stone. This was a sign of its permanence and stability, but even stone eventually erodes, cracks, and crumbles. The new covenant would be written into an even more everlasting and living place, into the hearts of the people. Jeremiah saw that after those days, saith the Lord, I will put my law in their inward parts and write it in their hearts, and I will be their God, and they shall be my people. When will this new covenant come forth? It already has, and the change is already happening in the hearts of modern Israel. The Old Testament, particularly the time Jeremiah lived in, was a story about people failing to live their covenants with God. There were good people who loved and served God, but the house of Israel largely failed to live up to its privileges and eventually went into exile and bondage because of its failures. This pattern is shown again and again in the Old Testament, the New Testament, and the Book of Mormon. But when we study closely these stories of failure and apostasy, another pattern emerges. Every time a prophet like Jeremiah thought that all was lost and that the house of Israel had no future, the Lord showed him the latter days. While Jeremiah was fated to see the destruction of Jerusalem, he also saw that it would be rebuilt by a people with a new covenant written in their hearts. At the end of the New Testament, when John was witnessing the dissolution and apostasy of the early Christian church, the Lord showed him a vision now known as the Book of Revelation. John saw a time when God would wipe away the tears of his people, and the old world of sorrow would be swept away. At the end of the Book of Mormon, when Mormon and Moroni were forced to witness the destruction of their people, they also saw a time when there shall be a new heaven and a new earth, and they shall be like unto the old, save the old have passed away, and all things have become new. Do you see a pattern here? Whenever a prophet was discouraged with the events of their own time, the Lord showed them the latter days. We live in the time that was shown to the ancient prophets to give them courage to go on. This was a time when the new covenant would emerge and the people would have it written in their hearts. Jeremiah may have had to live with the knowledge that his people were a lost cause, but he didn't have to live without hope because of what he saw happening in the latter days. We live in a complicated time with a lot of wickedness, strife, and contention when the forces of evil seem to be all around us. But we also live in a wondrous time, a time when the forces of good are also growing in power and influence. Every person's individual story is different and based on their own choices, but the end of the story for the house of Israel has been known for thousands of years. God will be victorious. A new covenant, a new people, and a new era will make all things new.